Go knit, Grandma. She said it with a grin that had nothing kind in it, and the word grandma, though technically true, landed like a push down a flight of stairs. I looked at her across the kitchen island, where she stood in her expensive activewear, sipping iced coffee like she hadn't just smacked me in the face with her voice. "All right," I said, reaching for the tea towel. "Maybe I'll knit a noose for your credit score." She laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. But that was always the way with Haley. She only heard what suited her. That morning had started like most do lately. My hands stiff from the cold that crept through the thin walls of the guest house, a converted garage, really, and the smell of someone else's coffee drifting from the main house. I used to make the coffee. Now I wasn't supposed to come in before 10. Privacy, Haley said. Routine. I lived on their property, in the house I gave them. More precisely, in the tiny outbuilding behind the house I once called home. The house where I raised Patrick, where I nursed my husband, George, through his last brutal months of cancer, where I baked lasagna every Sunday and wrapped birthday gifts at the dining room table. Now I live in the backyard, like a half-forgotten garden gnome. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. "Just until we get settled, Mom," Patrick had said when I signed the papers. "It'll still be your home." That was 5 years ago. They've since remodeled the kitchen twice, added a pool, hosted wine nights, brunches, even a baby shower for Haley's cousin, all without me. But I've never said a word. I was raised on silence and good posture. I cleaned the little guest house myself, cooked for one, paid my phone bill from the savings George and I built over 40 years. That morning, I'd come inside only because I'd heard little Milo crying. He's 5, my youngest grandson. A soft, solemn boy with my eyes. I found him sitting on the floor, clutching his foot. I bent down, checked his sock, saw the splinter. Haley came in just as I was calming him. She didn't see the pain in his face or the splinter I'd gently removed. She saw me in her kitchen. "You can't just wander in here, Jeanette." I wasn't wandering. Milo. "It's not about Milo," she said, already sighing like she was the patient one. "We've talked about boundaries." I straightened up slowly. My knees complain more than I do. "I raised boundaries," I said quietly. "And I raised your husband." Haley gave a sharp laugh, then the line, "Go knit, Grandma." And I did. I left the kitchen, walked out the back door, and crossed the yard that used to be mine. In my little place, I sat at the table and stared at my hands. They used to be strong. I held my husband's hand through his last breath with these hands. I gave Patrick his first bath with these hands, and now they trembled. Not with age, but with something new. Resolve. I opened the drawer under the kettle and pulled out the red folder I kept buried beneath old menus and electric bills. Inside were copies. The deed transfer. The joint account I'd set up for Patrick after George died. The money I gave them when Patrick's startup failed. The papers I'd signed when they said they just needed a little help to qualify for the refinance. All of it. I ran my finger down the printed lines like I was tracing a wound. Then I got up, poured myself tea, and called my lawyer. "Stuart, it's Jeanette. I need to talk about the house." Mrs. Colby, good morning. Is everything all right?" "No," I said. "But it will be." That afternoon, I walked to the bank. I don't drive anymore, not since my cataract surgery last year. At the bank, I sat across from a young man in a tight shirt and watched him blink when I asked for a printout of all linked accounts. "Just want to see where I still exist," I said. He chuckled, uncertain. I didn't smile back. By evening, I'd made a list. 17 automatic payments I'd never authorized, but had been running for years. Insurance premiums, Haley's gym membership, something labeled Kid Essentials for $280 monthly. All drafted from a household account Patrick had set up in my name for simplicity. Their simplicity? I knit, all right. I knit every figure together, every lie they wrapped in convenience and softened with a "thanks, Mom." At midnight, I stared out the window of my cold little room. I could see the glow of their kitchen through the trees. I imagined Haley in her robe, scrolling through her phone, telling Patrick what a relic I'd become. Tomorrow, I'd unravel more than yarn. The first time Patrick asked me for money, he was 21 and embarrassed. I remember it because he couldn't meet my eyes. Kept staring at the floor of the old kitchen, one hand nervously tugging at the hem of his hoodie. Just until I get my first paycheck, Mom. It's not much. I didn't want to ask Dad. George was still alive then. Stern, proud. He believed in earning things the hard way. He would have said no, but I didn't. I've always believed in helping where I can. So I gave him the $500, told him it was fine, told him I was proud of him for trying on his own, told him to keep going. I remember that day because it was the beginning, the first thread in a very long, very quiet unraveling. Patrick was always smart, not book smart. He scraped by in school, barely passed math. But he was charming, good at making people believe in him, good at ideas, not always good at finishing them. Over the years, I helped with more than just $500. There was the car down payment when he got his first job, the investment opportunity when his friend was starting a tech company, the rent when he lost that job, the credit card bills after Haley got pregnant with Milo. I never said no. And when George passed, sudden, cruel, a heart attack while he was fixing the shed roof, Patrick was the one who held me at the hospital, the one who cried with me, the one who said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of you now." I believed him. Back then, the house still felt warm, full of echoes and soft mornings. Patrick moved back in to help me get through it, though I noticed Haley didn't stay much at first. She'd show up for dinner, polite and careful, like someone meeting her boss's mother for the first time. I tried to make her feel welcome. I cooked for them, washed clothes, let them use the spare bedroom, then the master, when Haley said the guest room was too stuffy. When she found out she was pregnant with their second, Liam, they said they needed more space. I offered to step back. The house was too big for me anyway. "We could add a little cottage out back," Patrick suggested, already pulling up designs on his phone. "It'll be private. Close enough that we're together, but you'll have your own space, like a guest house. Until we figure out something more permanent." It sounded sweet at the time, sensible, so I paid for it. I took out part of my retirement fund to build that little one-bedroom shack. I made it home, hung up George's old fishing photo in the hallway, kept the bookshelf he built me, planted lilies outside the door. I signed the deed transfer after Patrick insisted it would be better for taxes if the house was in his name. "It'll all be ours one day anyway," he said, laughing, arms slung around my shoulder. "You're just cutting the middleman." It wasn't the first time someone told me I was being generous. It was the first time I felt like I was disappearing. Over the years, my name started to vanish from things. The mailbox still said Colby, but the deliveries were all theirs. The family calendar never included my doctor's appointments. Haley once hosted a birthday party for Milo and told the guests her mother, not me, had baked the cake. I'd stood there, in the kitchen, frosting still on my hands, and when I mentioned it to Patrick, he said, "It's not a big deal, Mom. She probably just misspoke. But it was a big deal. It all added up. The little exclusions, the casual dismissals. Like I was an extra in a movie I used to star in. I remember once, about 2 years ago, Haley introduced me to one of her friends as Pat's mom. She lives in the back, as if I were the gardener. She's very independent, she added, like it was a compliment. I smiled and nodded. What else could I do? That night, I sat alone in my guest house and looked around. I had a bed, a kettle, a small TV that barely got channels unless the weather was clear. I had my books, my photos, my memories. But I didn't have a place anymore. And still, I said nothing. I made excuses for them. They're busy. They're stressed. They're young, and the world is different now. It's not personal. But maybe it was. Maybe it always had been. Because the truth is, people don't have to shout to hurt you. Sometimes the quietest acts are the loudest betrayals. Like when Haley stopped knocking before she entered my place. Just walked in, talking on the phone, helping herself to aspirin or stamps. Like when she laughed at the sweater I made Liam for Christmas and gave it away because it itched. Like when she called my baking old-fashioned in front of her friends. Like when she said I was lucky to still have something to do in retirement, as if knitting was all I'd ever done. I was a nurse for 41 years. I delivered babies, stitched wounds, held hands through death. I worked night shifts while raising a child and burying a husband. But now I was just Grandma with the knitting needles. Go knit, Grandma. I smiled when she said it. But that smile was a lie. Because behind it, something finally cracked open. Not like breaking glass, but like a door that had been stuck shut for years. And I realized, maybe I had been knitting too long. Maybe it was time to unravel something else. The next morning, I stepped out into the yard and felt the cold bite at my fingers. October always carried a particular edge in Minnesota. Not yet snow, but enough wind to remind you winter was coming. The maple tree in the center of the yard was shedding in slow, exhausted bursts. It used to be our pride. George and I had planted it together back when Patrick still wore footy pajamas and believed worms could live in his pockets. I stood there for a while, watching Haley's dog relieve itself on the flower bed I kept, and wondered when exactly I'd stopped being part of the inside and started being part of the background. Patrick came out just then, gym bag over his shoulder, car keys in hand. He saw me, gave a half wave. Morning, Mom. His voice carried the same casual indifference it always did lately, the kind of tone you use for a neighbor you don't know well. Morning, I answered. He paused at the driveway. Hey, just a heads up. Haley's sister is coming over today. She's bringing her twins. It's going to be a bit hectic in the house, so maybe it's better if you keep to your side, just for the day. Just for the day. Like all the other days. Like every quiet exclusion dressed in soft words. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He smiled, relieved, I think, and drove off, music blaring as he turned the corner. Back in my cottage, I made tea and sat at the small table by the window. I could see the backyard clearly from there. The sandbox George built for Patrick, now filled with plastic dinosaurs and cracked trucks. The grill I bought them 2 summers ago for Patrick's birthday, which Haley insisted had to be stainless steel with side burners. The folding chairs where I used to sit with Milo and tell him stories about the moon. Today, those chairs were stacked. Forgotten. By noon, I could hear the house buzzing with laughter. Haley's shrill voice, the scream laugh of her sister, the thudding chaos of toddlers. I wasn't invited. I hadn't even been told. But I was always careful not to let bitterness brew. Bitterness poisons slowly, like sugar left out in the rain. So I baked instead. Banana bread. Not for them, not anymore. Just for me. At 3 o'clock, Milo knocked on my door. He didn't need to. He knew he was always welcome. But he did anyway. That's the kind of boy he is. Thoughtful, soft-spoken. "Grandma, can I come in for a minute?" "Of course, sweetheart." He sat at the table, eyes on the bread cooling beside him. I sliced a piece and handed it over. He took it with both hands like it was gold. They said I couldn't eat cake in the house, but I wanted something sweet. "You'll never be told no here," I said. "Well, not when it comes to banana bread." He smiled, then frowned a little, chewing. "Why doesn't Mommy like you?" The words landed with the weight of a dropped skillet. I kept my face still. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged, but his ears turned red. "She says things, like you're too old to help, or that you mess things up. But you never mess things up. You always fix things." I swallowed the knot in my throat. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that it didn't matter. But that would be a lie. "People say things sometimes," I said instead. "Not always because they're true, but because they don't know better." He nodded solemnly, like he understood more than a 7-year-old should. "Do you ever get sad?" "Sometimes." "Because of her?" I paused. "Sometimes." He reached for my hand, small fingers curling around mine. And in that moment, I felt more seen than I had in years. Then, of course, Haley barged in without knocking. "Milo, there you are. I told you not to run off." Her eyes landed on me, narrowed slightly. "You really shouldn't encourage him to sneak away, Jeanette." I didn't. He knocked, and I answered. "Well, next time, maybe you could tell him to ask me first." I stood, calmly, carefully. He wanted banana bread. I gave him some. She scoffed. "Maybe you could knit some boundaries instead." That again. The knitting. As if that was all I was good for. I didn't reply. Just looked at her. Long enough that she shifted her weight and looked away first. "Come on, Milo," she said, her voice tight. "We don't have time for old-fashioned nonsense." Milo hesitated, glancing back at me. I nodded. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go on." After they left, I cleaned the kitchen slowly, hands shaking only slightly now, not with age, with restraint. Because it had become clear. She wasn't just rude. She wasn't just busy or thoughtless. She was deliberate. This wasn't neglect, it was erasure. Little by little, she was rewriting the family map, pushing me further to the edge until I fell off the page entirely. Well, I've lived on the edge before, and I've got sharp enough needles to knit my way back in. Only this time, it won't be with scarves or sweaters. It'll be with paperwork. Tomorrow, I was going back to the bank. The next morning, I dressed in my good coat. The navy one with the clean lines and deep pockets. George used to call it my serious coat. Said I looked like a woman no one could push around when I wore it. That's what I needed today. I folded a few documents into my bag, made sure I had my ID and the red folder, the one with every quiet sacrifice filed and dated. Then I called a cab. I could have taken the bus, but I didn't want to sit among teenagers shouting into their phones or retirees loudly guessing today's weather. I needed silence and clarity. At the bank, I asked for Ruth. She's been working there for as long as I can remember. Soft-spoken woman with a pinched smile and kind hands. She helped George and me with our first mortgage, with Patrick's college fund, with the refinance when things got tight after George's surgery. She looked surprised to see me. Jeanette, well, now it's been a while. Yes, I said, taking a seat. But I need to make some changes. Of course. Let's see what we've got. We went through the accounts one by one. The checking account I opened in my 20s was still active, though only used now for my Social Security deposits and occasional withdrawals. The savings account had dwindled some. And then there was the household account, the one Patrick set up under my name after George died, with him as a co-signer. He'd insisted at the time. It's just easier, Mom. That way I can help manage the bills. Back then, I was too tired from grief to argue. I let him handle things. Trusted him. I shouldn't have. Because as Ruth clicked through the tabs and opened statements, the numbers piled up. Automatic payments, dozens of them. To stores I'd never stepped foot in. Gym memberships, streaming platforms, a wine club subscription, and payments labeled LJ tutoring, house management, wellness subscription, all neatly flowing from the household account. My money. My name. Ruth looked over the glasses perched on the end of her nose. Is this all still accurate, Jeanette? No, I said. It isn't, and I'd like to remove any authorized users immediately. She hesitated, politely. Even Patrick? Especially Patrick. She didn't ask why. That's what I liked about Ruth. She processed the request, then printed a stack of forms. As I signed the first one, my hand steadied. Would you like to close the account entirely? She asked. I thought about it. Not yet, but I want all transfers suspended. No more auto drafts, no more linked cards. Understood. When we were done, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded page. A copy of the deed to the house. My house. Or rather, what used to be mine. Do you know a good real estate attorney? I asked. Ruth blinked. I do, actually. Ron Edwards, across the street, second floor. I thanked her and crossed the street. The elevator smelled of cheap aftershave and stale carpet, but I took it anyway. My knees were already reminding me that I wasn't 45 anymore. When I reached the office, a young receptionist greeted me. Lip gloss, nails like claws. I'm here to see Mr. Edwards, I said. Do you have an appointment? Tell him it's Jeanette Colby. I brought the house. That got me in fast enough. Ron Edwards turned out to be a round man in a tight suit. Balding, but with good posture. He smiled like someone who knew how to talk to old women without making them feel old. What can I do for you, Mrs. Colby? I want to revisit a deed transfer, I said. One I made 5 years ago. I was told it would protect my family from tax complications. Turns out, it mostly protected them from having to respect me. He blinked, but recovered quickly. You transferred your home into your son's name? I did, but I paid for every nail in that house. I built it with my husband, and I'm tired of living in the yard. He leaned back. Was the transfer made as a gift? It was. No payment involved. Just trust. Well, that helps. Gifts can sometimes be revisited, especially if the terms of use were informal and there's evidence of undue influence. Define undue, I said dryly. He smiled. Let's just say, if someone convinces you to hand over everything and then treats you like a burden, the courts may take an interest. I laid the folder on his desk. This is every payment I made for that family in the last 10 years. Mortgage, renovations, school fees, groceries, vacations. The cottage I live in? I built that too. He flipped through the pages. This is substantial. I know. We could draft a letter of intent to reverse the gift, start a process to reclaim your rights to the property, or at the very least, demand a new arrangement, legal tenancy, financial restitution, even eviction options if necessary. I don't want to evict my son, I said. I just want them to remember who built the floor they're standing on. Ron looked at me, more serious now. I can help you, he said, but you should be ready. It may upset them. I'm counting on it, I replied. When I left the office, the sun had dropped lower in the sky. The maple tree out front was shedding leaves in fiery reds and golds, scattering across the sidewalk like spilled secrets. I took the long way home. I needed the air, the silence, the feel of the world still spinning, even as mine had shifted. And when I reached the cottage, my little, drafty, not quite home, I pulled out the knitting basket from under the bed. Inside was a half-finished scarf I'd started for Liam. Soft blue yarn, his favorite color. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I unraveled it, yard by yard, row by row, until it was nothing but loose string again, ready to be repurposed, just like me. Patrick showed up the next morning with that same knock he always used. 3 light taps, like he was checking if I was awake or if I'd died in my sleep. I opened the door before he could knock again. He didn't smile. "Hey," he said, stepping inside without waiting. "Got a weird call from the bank last night? Something about the household account being frozen?" He smelled like aftershave and nerves. He was wearing the fleece pullover Haley got him for Father's Day, the one she called business casual for real men, whatever that meant. I remembered when Patrick used to wear flannel and smelled like motor oil and vending machine coffee. "Yes," I said. "I asked them to stop all automatic payments." He frowned, that crease between his eyebrows forming the way it always did when he was about to get defensive. "Why?" I walked to the kettle and poured myself tea. I didn't offer him any. "Because I no longer want to fund a household I'm not part of." He let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Mom? Come on." I didn't answer. I sat. He stayed standing. That told me everything I needed to know. "Is this about Haley?" he asked. "Did she say something again?" "It's about everything," I said. "It's about the last 5 years, about the fact that I live in a box I paid for, behind a house I gave you, while you and your wife use my accounts to buy $42 candles and wine subscriptions." He opened his mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. "I've seen the statements. Don't insult either of us." Patrick sat then, slowly, like someone realizing the chair might not hold his weight. "You could have said something sooner." I smiled. Not kindly. "You could have noticed sooner." He looked at me, really looked for the first time in months. There was something behind his eyes. Not guilt, not yet, but something close to confusion, like a man waking from a long nap, unsure of the hour. Is this because of what Haley said the other day?" "No," I said. "But that was the final ribbon on the whole mess. Go knit, Grandma." "Do you know she said that in front of Milo?" He rubbed his face, exhaling hard. "She has a sharp tongue. You know how she gets." "I know exactly how she gets, and I know how you let her." That landed. He didn't argue. "Look," he said finally, "if there's a problem with the finances, we can figure something out. I'll go through the charges, cut out the unnecessary ones." "No," I said. "You misunderstand. I'm not asking for a budget meeting. I'm telling you I'm out. You no longer have access to my accounts. The house is being reviewed for deed reassessment. I've hired a lawyer." His mouth opened, then closed, like a fish. Then, "You're kidding." "I'm not." He blinked fast, stood up again, started pacing the 3 steps it took to cross the room. "This is..." Mom, this is extreme. You're talking about reversing legal property transfers. You're talking about tearing everything apart. No, I said again. I'm talking about finally acknowledging that I gave everything I had, and in return, I was told to stay quiet and knit. His pacing stopped. So that's what this is. Punishment. Correction, I said. Boundary. Patrick sat back down, hard. You're really serious about this? I've never been more serious. He went quiet for a long time, and then, in the smallest voice I've heard from him since he was 7 years old and broke the neighbor's window with a baseball. I didn't know you were unhappy. I stared at him, at my son, at the man I raised, who I spoon-fed soup through fevers, who I waited up for after school dances, who I drove to his first job interview in a borrowed suit and shoes that blistered his heels. And I said, as evenly as I could, because I didn't think it would make a difference. He winced like I'd slapped him. I wanted to take it back. Some part of me still wanted to wrap him in the old comfort of motherhood, smooth it all over with tea and soft apologies. But I didn't. Because the truth is, it would have made no difference. Not when Haley's voice was louder. Not when the status quo worked just fine for everyone but me. Patrick stood up again, slowly this time, like a man who'd been hit with something heavy, but deserved. I need to think, he said. I nodded. That would be a start. At the door, he paused. What do I tell Haley? I looked him straight in the eye. Tell her to knit. He didn't laugh, just left. When the door clicked shut, I sat for a long time. The silence wasn't comforting, not yet. It echoed. But it also gave me room to breathe. That evening, I got a text from Milo. Grandma, can we read the moon story tonight, even if just on the phone? I called him, my voice steady. And while we read about the old woman who climbed to the moon using a thread of starlight, I thought, that's me now. No longer small. No longer afraid. And finally, starting to climb. Josh showed up just after lunch the next day. No warning, just a knock. Firm, not polite. Followed by the creak of the screen door and a voice that still carried a hint of boyhood. Grandma, you home? He didn't wait for me to answer. He never did. I was already reaching for the kettle when he stepped inside, taller than I remembered, with that same crooked smile and the hair that always fell in his eyes. He'd turned 20 last month. Sophomore year. Engineering. Paid for by scholarships and, if I had to guess, some leftover guilt. Mom's on a rampage, he said, flopping into the chair at the table. Dad's pacing like a caged dog. Good, I said. Josh grinned. You started a fire. I didn't start it, I corrected, pouring water into the kettle. I just stopped pretending it wasn't burning down my walls. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Is it true? About the bank accounts? The house? I nodded. He let out a low whistle. Damn. Language. Sorry. The kettle clicked on behind me. I could feel his eyes on me. Curious, respectful, a little amused. I always knew you had it in you, he said. I always knew they counted on me not using it. Josh was different. Always had been. Quieter than his younger brothers, more observant. When he was a boy, he'd come over just to sit with me while I cooked, asking questions like, how do you know when bread dough's ready? And, why does everyone think Grandma's old when she still moves faster than Dad on a Monday? Even now, he noticed the things the rest ignored. They're scared, he said, watching me steep the tea. Haley's been Googling lawyers. Dad keeps muttering about damage control. Liam asked if you were mad because he didn't eat your Christmas cookies. I'm not mad at Liam, I said. Or Milo. Or you. He raised an eyebrow. But? I'm disappointed, I said softly, in myself, for letting it go this far. I handed him a cup. He took it with both hands, like he always had. I've been thinking, I said, sitting across from him, about what comes next. Josh nodded. He was good at listening without interrupting, a rare skill these days. I want to set up something for Milo and Liam, I said. And for you, not just cash. Not something they'll blow on sneakers and gaming consoles. Something real, protected, with purpose. You mean like a trust? Yes, with rules, with conditions. With my name on it. So they'll remember who gave them the chance. He looked at me for a long moment. Why me? He asked finally. I smiled. Because you came here. Not for money. Not for apologies. Just to check on me. He looked down at his tea. And because you're the only one who never made me feel invisible. He swallowed hard. I'd take care of it. Whatever you need. You know that, right? I do. We sat there for a while in that small room. Grandmother and grandson. The only real bridge left between two generations split by silence and soft betrayal. I already called Richard, I said. My banker. He's starting the paperwork. I want you listed as secondary trustee when you're 21. I'll handle it until then. Josh set his cup down carefully. Does Dad know? Not yet. He looked conflicted, not surprised. Just torn between the boy who still wanted to believe in his father and the man starting to see the cracks. He'll be mad. He'll live. A pause. Mom won't take it well. She already hasn't. Josh chuckled. You always did have a way with words. No, I said. I just finally stopped using the wrong ones. He leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the small space, the crocheted curtains, the jar of buttons, the wooden photo frame of George holding baby Patrick like he was made of glass. They don't see this, he said. They just think of it as the shed. They don't know you built all of it. They never asked. I wish they had. So do I. We talked a while longer. About college. About his friend who was failing calculus. About the girl he liked but hadn't told yet. About how strange it was, being part of a family that only functioned when someone else kept quiet. I don't want to become them, he said. Then don't, I replied. Start by telling the truth. Always. Even when it stings. He nodded. Before he left, he hugged me. Not the rushed kind people give at holidays, but the kind that means something. Thanks, Grandma. For what? For not disappearing. Even when they tried to shrink you down to silence. I held him a moment longer. After he left, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the sky turn to that soft gray blue that comes before dusk. The kind George always called thinking light. Outside, Haley was in the garden, yelling into her phone. Her voice carried, even over the wind. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I had work to do, not with yarn, not with recipes, but with pen and paper, signatures and intention. The kind of work that writes new endings. The kind that stitches legacy with steel thread. I spent the next 3 evenings at my table, sorting through every receipt, transaction, and email I could find. The dining chair wasn't made for long hours. My back ached, my hands cramped. But I kept going. I had a banker's envelope full of old check stubs, a shoebox marked home stuff with tax letters and appliance warranties, and a printed spreadsheet Richard had kindly prepared, itemizing every outgoing transfer from the last 8 years. Every single one. I used sticky notes and colored pens. Not because I needed to, but because it gave the work the weight it deserved. And the thing about financial harm is, people often don't see it as violence. It's not loud. It doesn't bruise. But when you tally it up, it leaves marks just the same. The numbers told the story no one else had the courage to read. $1,253, temporary loan for Patrick's first failed business, $6,800. Haley's executive certificate program, she dropped out of halfway through, $29,400. Their second kitchen remodel, including imported tile, $3,200. The pool heater that never worked properly. $4,500 year. Groceries, utilities, and property taxes that I'd been covering while living rent-free in the guest house, $10,000. The refinance assist that was supposed to be a short-term buffer but was never paid back, $2,900. Haley's Invisalign, $300 month. Subscriptions, shopping services, delivery apps, home aromatherapy systems, meal kits. The list went on. Over $130,000, most of it undocumented by anything but my own kindness. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. It was something deeper than that. The cold clarity of someone finally looking truth in the eye. And truth didn't flinch. I called Richard the next morning. "Ready to proceed with the trust," I said. He was efficient as always. "We've drafted the documents. You'll need to sign in person, but we can start the internal transfers right away. How would you like to fund it?" I didn't hesitate. "Close the household account. Move the balance to the trust. Liquidate the CD that matures next month and schedule the annuity transfer quarterly. Set Josh as the contingent trustee upon my passing." "Understood." "And Richard?" "Yes, Mrs. Colby." "No access for Patrick or Haley. None, no exceptions." He paused, but only for a breath. "Of course." By noon, it was done, or at least enough of it to give me the peace I'd gone too long without. I stepped outside for the first time that day, let the sun hit my face. Haley was in the driveway, unloading groceries from the back of the SUV. Organic, overpriced, logo-heavy. The kind of shopping you do when you want your neighbors to know how clean you eat. She glanced over and gave a tight smile. "Morning." "Afternoon," I corrected gently. She didn't reply. I started back toward the guest house. "By the way," she called after me, "Patrick said there was some issue with the mortgage autopay. He's going to call the bank." "I already did," I said without turning. Another silence. "You canceled it?" she asked, her voice rising. "I did." "You didn't even tell us." "Neither did you," I said, facing her now. "When you used that same account for 6 years without asking. That's not fair. Neither is living in someone else's house while treating them like an unwanted tenant." She blinked. The bags in her arms shifted. "You're being dramatic," she said. "This affects the boys. You really want to disrupt everything for a grudge?" "This isn't a grudge, Haley. It's a boundary, and I should have drawn it a long time ago." She said something under her breath, probably for herself, and slammed the hatch closed. I let her storm inside. She didn't know yet about the deed review, about the trust, about the lawyer. But she would. Soon. That evening, Patrick sent me a text. "Mom, we need to talk. Can we come over tonight?" I replied, "No, I'm resting. Try again tomorrow." He didn't like that. I could tell by the second text, the tone sharpened to the edge of entitlement. "This is serious, Mom. It's not just your decision." I didn't answer, because it was my decision. It had always been my decision. I'd just finally remembered that. Instead, I made soup. My own recipe, passed down from my mother. The kind that simmers low and slow, filling the house with something warm, something earned. Later, I sat with a notepad and started writing a letter to Josh. Not legal, not formal, just words I wanted him to keep. I told him that money is never just money. It's time. It's care. It's years of waking early and going without. And that anyone who treats it like an entitlement has already shown you what they think your time is worth. I told him I trusted him, not just with numbers, but with remembering who held his father when he was sick, who sewed the knees of his baby jeans, who paid for the soccer cleats and showed up to every game, even when no one else did. I folded the letter and tucked it into an envelope marked with his name. Then I turned off the light. Not because I was tired, but because tomorrow was coming and I was no longer hiding from it. The house was quiet the next morning, unnaturally so. No sound of Milo's feet on the stairs, no blender screaming in Haley's kitchen, no half-shouted phone calls from Patrick in the backyard while pacing with a coffee he didn't brew himself. It was the kind of silence I used to wish for. Now it sat with me like an uninvited guest, not hostile, just heavy. I didn't mind it. I'd lived alone before. After George died, there were months where silence was the only company I had, and I learned how to sit beside it without reaching for noise. You can only cry into empty space for so long before you start talking to yourself instead. Not with grief, but with instruction. Get up, Jeanette. Boil water. Fold the towels, one task at a time. That voice came back to me now. I made oatmeal. Plain. No cinnamon, no berries. I didn't feel like sweetness today. After breakfast, I sat by the window with my sewing basket, not knitting, not today, and started repairing the tear in the curtain that had been there since spring. A clean job. Needle in, needle out. Soft gray thread through faded linen. Outside, I could see Haley come and go through the side door, always on the phone, always talking too loudly. She wore the same tight black workout gear she always did, like armor. I used to think she was just a woman out of her depth, overwhelmed by children and housework. Now I wasn't sure. Maybe she liked control more than she liked company. Maybe she'd convinced herself I was lucky just to be tolerated. And maybe, for a while, I believed that too. By midday, Patrick still hadn't come by. Usually, if he was upset, he'd try to diffuse things with a joke. "You're not still mad, are you, Ma?" Or, "Come on, you know Haley says dumb things when she's stressed." But not now. Now he was quiet. Probably because he'd finally realized I wasn't playing along anymore. Good. I boiled eggs, made a sandwich, read the newspaper in full. I hadn't done that in years. There was something satisfying about reading something that wasn't curated by an algorithm or fed to me by someone else's taste. I read every line, even the obituaries. Not because I knew anyone in them, but because it reminded me. Lives end. Names vanish. But stories remain if someone cares enough to write them down. In the afternoon, I took out the photo albums. Not the ones I kept in the living room for show. The old ones. The ones that still smelled faintly of glue and dust and years. George with his lopsided smile, holding up a fishing rod with a catch too small to eat. Patrick, at age 5, his face smeared with birthday cake. Me in my nurse's uniform, back when the whites were crisp and the shifts were 12 hours long and no one cared how tired you looked. Only how steady your hands were. We were ordinary, but we were something. Real. Honest. We didn't pretend. And now I lived behind the house I built, behind the life I gave, spoken about in past tense like a chapter that had already closed. Only I hadn't closed it. And that made all the difference. Around 4 o'clock, I stepped outside with a broom and swept the porch of leaves. It was chilly, but not cold. Just enough to keep the air honest. Liam came running up, cheeks pink, sweater crooked. "Grandma, can I stay with you for a bit?" I smiled. "Is your mom okay with that?" "She's doing yoga," he whispered, as if yoga were a secret mission. "Then you better come inside quick before she hears." He followed me in, sat at the table, pulled out his colored pencils from the drawer I kept just for him. I made cocoa. Not the powdered kind. Real milk, real chocolate, he noticed. "You always make it better," he said. I sat across from him. "Because I don't rush." He nodded, like that made perfect sense. "Are you mad at Daddy and Mommy?" he asked, not looking up from his drawing. "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm just not willing to be invisible anymore." He thought about that, coloring in the windows of a crooked house. "Invisible like in Harry Potter?" "No," I said. "Worse. Invisible like someone who's always there but no one sees." "Oh." Silence again, but not the heavy kind this time. The shared kind. The kind that makes room for understanding. When Haley came to collect him, she didn't come inside. She stood at the edge of the porch, like I'd hung garlic around the door. "Liam," she called, phone in one hand, keys in the other. "Time to go." He packed up without protest, hugged me hard. "I like it here. I like having you here." He ran off. She didn't say thank you. I didn't expect her to. After the door closed, I sat back down. There was a letter from the attorney in my mailbox, Ron Edwards. It was just a status update, confirmation that the review process for the deed had been formally initiated, and that notice had been sent to Patrick and Haley. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in the folder labeled House 1981. Tomorrow would be louder, I knew. There would be questions, complaints, maybe shouting, maybe slammed doors, maybe another speech from Patrick about family and loyalty. And how could you? Let them talk. Today, no one had raised their voice at me. No one had minimized me. No one had told me to knit. And for the first time in a long while, I finished the day without apologizing for existing. I found out about the party from Milo. He came running over with frosting on his sleeve and a helium balloon bumping behind him like a pet on a string. "Grandma, did you see the cake?" "No, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to his height. "What cake?" He looked puzzled. "For Mommy's birthday. There's sprinkles. It's in the big room." I blinked. "Oh. They said no one's allowed to touch it until pictures. But I snuck a sprinkle." He grinned, proud of his rebellion. I smiled back, steady. "That's between us." He giggled, gave me a sticky hug, and ran off before I could say anything more. They hadn't invited me. Not even a polite, perfunctory text. Not even a cold, "We're doing something small," to give the illusion of inclusion. They were throwing a full party. Decorations, cake, guests. And I wasn't just excluded. I was erased. From the window, I could see the backyard filled with folding chairs and catering trays. Haley wore a floaty white blouse and carried a glass of something too pink to be natural. Patrick hovered behind her, laughing at whatever her sister said. I watched them for maybe 2 minutes. Then I went back to my chair. The letter to the lawyer was already drafted. It had taken me 2 days to write, not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, but because I wanted every word to land like a closing door. To whom it may concern. After careful review and consultation, I, Jeanette Colby, wish to proceed with full revocation of the deed transfer made in 2018 to my son, Patrick Colby, The property, located at 14 Maple Lane, was transferred under informal terms of familial trust, which have since been irreparably broken. I'd read it so many times I could recite it in my sleep, but I read it again anyway. Then I signed it. And as the music from the house picked up, a cheap pop song vibrating through their rented speaker, I sealed the envelope and placed it by the door. I'd drop it at the post office first thing tomorrow. It wasn't rage, not anymore. It was something cleaner, cooler. This was just a transfer of weight. What they refused to carry: respect, gratitude, memory. I no longer would either. Mid-afternoon, I stepped outside for a moment, not to be seen, just to feel the air. Haley's sister saw me from across the yard and waved. A quick, awkward flutter of the hand, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. I nodded once, then turned and started deadheading my petunias. I didn't care who noticed. Josh came by later, long after the guests had started to leave. He didn't say hello, just walked in and sat down like he belonged. He still had frosting on his shirt. They seriously didn't invite you? I looked up from my knitting, not out of surrender, but out of choice. Calm hands. Calm heart. Apparently not. He shook his head. I asked Dad. He said it didn't seem like the kind of thing you'd enjoy. That's what people say when they want their guilt to sound like logic. Josh watched me for a minute. I brought you cake. He set down a paper plate with a slice that had clearly been wrapped in napkins and foil with military precision. I could tell he'd rescued it without permission. Thank you, I said. It's store-bought, kinda dry. Still a kind gesture. He looked like he wanted to say more but didn't. Just stared at the floor. They're panicking, you know, he said. About the letter. I assumed. Mom thinks you're bluffing? I'm not. I know. We sat quietly. Outside, a car door slammed, guests trickling out. Then he said, I saw you watching from the window earlier. You didn't look mad. I'm not. What did you feel? I thought about that. Free, I said. Finally, free of pretending to want what I was never given. Josh nodded, slowly. They won't understand. They don't need to. He looked down again. They're still your family. They were, I said. Now they're people I used to love with no limits. And now I love them with boundaries. Josh didn't argue. He never did when the truth was heavy. He stayed until it was dark, helped me pack up some books I'd been meaning to donate. Before he left, I handed him a small box. What's this? It's your grandfather's watch, the one I said I'd give you when you turned 21. But I think now's the time. He opened it slowly. His eyes went soft. I'll take care of it, he said. I know. After he left, I placed the leftover cake in the fridge. I'd eat it tomorrow, or maybe not. Tonight, I'd have tea. And while they cleaned up party streamers and half-deflated balloons, I'd sit by the window, breathing air that finally belonged to me again, not as a gift, not as a leftover, but as my own. The rain came quietly that night, tapping on the windows like an old friend. I didn't sleep much, not out of worry, but because my body had become used to early mornings. Nurses never truly retire. Even after years away from the hospital floor, I still woke before dawn, expecting to check vitals or change linens. Instead, I listened to the sound of water hitting the roof, steady and slow, and let my thoughts arrange themselves. When the sun rose, the world was clean. Leaves stuck to the porch steps. The grass shimmered. Somewhere, a bird tried out a tentative note, then gave up. I brewed tea and pulled on my raincoat. The letter to the lawyer was already mailed, the trust already funded, the boundaries already drawn. There was nothing left to wait for. I walked to the end of the driveway to collect the mail. Just a few envelopes, a coupon flyer, a dentist appointment reminder for Haley, still listed at my address. I dropped it in the trash on my way back. At noon, Patrick knocked. He didn't come with anger, not this time. He stood like someone trying to remember what humility feels like. "Can I come in?" "You already did." He stepped inside, eyes scanning the room like it might have changed since the last time, like maybe I'd replaced my kettle with a guillotine. He sat. So did I. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke. "We got the notice, from the attorney." I nodded. "I didn't know you were serious." "I was. I didn't think you'd actually—" He stopped, shook his head. "Mom, you gave us that house." "I lent it," I said. "You mistook it for a gift." "It was never about money." "No," I said. "It was about respect," which I accepted in smaller and smaller portions until there was none left. He looked down at his hands. "I didn't see it. You didn't want to." He looked up. "Can we fix this?" I sipped my tea, thought carefully. "That depends on what you mean by fix. If you mean make it go away, then no. If you mean begin again, with truth and limits and no more pretending, then maybe." He nodded, slowly. It looked like it hurt. "Haley's furious." "I'm not surprised. She thinks you're trying to punish us." "I'm not. I'm just done volunteering for my own erasure." He swallowed. "What happens now?" "I stay in the home I paid for. You acknowledge that it's mine, not yours. You and Haley find your own way, not using my name, my credit, or my savings. The trust will support the boys, and Josh will oversee it after I'm gone." He was quiet. "That's a lot." "It's less than what I've given you so far." Patrick exhaled, leaned forward. "I miss Dad," he said. "So do I." He would have known what to say. "No," I said, "but he would have known when to say nothing. He was good at that." Patrick nodded. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "You already did," I replied. "You just didn't notice." That made him flinch. He deserved it. "But," I added more gently, "you can still earn your way back." "How?" "Show up. Not for money, not for favors. Just show up. Listen. Say thank you. Teach your sons to say it too. And when you speak about me, speak truth." He didn't promise. That gave me hope. Promises are cheap. Silence takes effort. He stood, hesitated, then did something he hadn't done in years. Kissed the top of my head before leaving. I didn't cry. Later, I baked apple bread. I gave half to the neighbors across the fence, the new couple with the quiet dog and polite greetings. They didn't know much about me, which was refreshing. When I handed them the still warm loaf, the woman blinked and said, "Oh, wow. Thank you." Just that. 2 words I hadn't heard in my own family in years. I ate the other half with tea and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Dignity is a quiet room you reclaim one piece at a time." Then I kept writing. Not about them. About me. My childhood. My marriage. The night George taught me how to dance barefoot in the kitchen. The time I pulled a splinter from Patrick's palm and he cried, not because it hurt, but because he thought I'd be disappointed in him. I wrote not for revenge, not even for legacy. I wrote because silence no longer suited me. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I felt entirely, beautifully visible. A week passed. No fireworks. No apologies carved in marble. No miracle dinner invitations with clean napkins and better intentions. But there was peace. And peace, as I'd learned, doesn't arrive with drums. It slips in the back door, barefoot, and sits beside you while you shell peas or sweep the floor. I spent most of that week quietly. The garden was thinning now. October's hand had pulled half the color from the leaves, and the petals curled in on themselves like tired hands. I clipped what was left and laid them on newspaper to dry, not to press, just to witness the shape they'd held before they faded. There's a beauty in knowing when to let go. Josh came by twice, once with new batteries for my smoke detector, and once just to sit and drink tea without a word. He didn't need explanations. He had the rare gift of letting silence stay comfortable. Milo stopped by too. Haley must not have noticed, or chose not to fight it. He brought a drawing, me in a red cape holding a lightning bolt, standing on top of a house. "You're like Thor," he said, "but smarter." I tacked it to the inside of the cupboard, next to the jar of dried rosemary and my measuring spoons. Every time I opened it, I smiled without meaning to. Patrick didn't come back, but he texted once. "We got your terms. Understood. Working on the paperwork." That was all. No warmth, no regret. Still, it was something. One evening, I walked past the main house on my way to the mailbox. The porch lights were on, the living room full of that soft glow that makes you think a family might be laughing just beyond the curtains. For a moment, I paused. Not to stare, just to remember. There had been good years, real ones. Birthday breakfasts, Christmas mornings, the year I helped Haley finish nursing school applications, back when she still asked my opinion and thanked me for it. The Sunday Patrick built a birdhouse with Josh and spent the whole afternoon trying to hammer in a nail without splitting the wood. Those years weren't a lie, but they weren't a shield either. Good memories don't cancel harm. They sit beside it. Both are true. I checked the mailbox, a letter from the lawyer confirming the freeze on further title action. 2 catalogs, one small envelope with my name handwritten on the front. Inside, a simple note. "Thank you for standing up. I didn't know I needed someone to show me how. Josh." I read it twice. Then I placed it in the tin where I kept George's old cards and one photo Patrick drew when he was 7. A messy family portrait with 4 stick figures and a giant smiling sun. That night, I lit a candle for myself. Not for prayer, not for ritual, just to mark the time, to say, I was here, I am still here, and no one gets to edit me out. I made soup with what I had in the fridge, chopped carrots, lentils, garlic, the kind of soup you stir slowly, with the radio humming and the window slightly open. I ate it at the table, alone, not lonely. Later, I picked up my knitting again. Not because someone expected it of me, not to stay busy or quiet or useful, just because I wanted to. And that, I realized, was the difference. Wanting, choosing, not being placed, but placing myself, deliberately, firmly, kindly, a stitch at a time. On Thursday, I got a call from Gloria. She used to live 3 houses down before her knees gave out and her daughter moved her into an apartment complex across town. We hadn't spoken in months, not because of anything between us, just time doing what it does, folding people into their own corners. "Jeanette," she said, "I don't mean to be a bother, but do you still know how to read medical reports?" That question told me everything I needed to know. I grabbed my bag and took a cab. The bus would have taken too long, and when someone sounds like that, like they're asking for permission just to be afraid, you don't delay. Gloria's place was small, efficient. She had a recliner, a folding table with a jigsaw puzzle half done, and a stack of mail tied with a rubber band, like it might bite. She looked smaller, too. Not in body, in presence. The way some women shrink when the world stops listening. She handed me a folder. I can't make heads or tails of it. They said something about markers. Elevated. But they also said, watchful waiting. What does that even mean? I sat, opened the folder, let my fingers remember the weight of paper that carries fear. We went through it together. It wasn't urgent. Not yet. But it was real. Something to keep track of. Something that deserved a second opinion. They never look me in the eye anymore, Gloria said softly. Just type. And smile. I know, I said. Am I overreacting? No, I said. You're paying attention. She let out a breath that had been caught in her chest too long. You were always good at this, she said. I almost replied, I used to be, but stopped myself. Because that's the lie they feed us. That usefulness has an expiration date. I'm not expired. I'm here. We called her daughter, explained what we'd found, set up a new appointment with a different doctor, one who'd trained under a friend of mine back when the hospital still had a decent cafeteria and nurses weren't expected to chart with one hand and hold a dying patient's hand with the other. When I left, Gloria held my arm longer than needed. You ever think about doing this again? She asked. I smiled. I am doing it. Back home, the porch had more leaves than usual. I swept slowly, letting my body work the way it wanted, without rush. The ache in my shoulder didn't bother me like it used to. Maybe because now it came with purpose. Josh texted me a photo of Liam holding a book. He wants to read with you tonight. I texted back. He can come tomorrow after school. We'll make muffins too. 15 minutes later, Patrick called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Hey, just wanted to say we got the documents. It's fine. I get it now, and thank you for everything before. I didn't say it enough. I didn't replay the message. Once was enough. That night, I pulled out my old badge, the one with the photo from '89 and my name in bold print, Jeanette Colby, RN. I'd kept it in a box for years, next to hospital pins and a medal they gave us during the flu outbreak of '94. I pinned it to my corkboard above the desk, not as nostalgia, as truth. I was never just a mother, never just a wife, never just a woman with a kettle and a quiet tongue. I am, someone who knew how to care, how to lead, how to endure, and now how to say no with grace. They took so much for granted, but they never took me, because I'm still here, and I've still got more to give, but only where it's seen, respected, and earned. Saturday morning, I wore lipstick. Just a touch. The soft coral one I used to wear to work on Sundays, back when George would whistle at me from the front steps like I was 30 again. It wasn't for anyone, just a reminder that I was still mine. The community center had posted a sign a few weeks ago. They were looking for volunteers to help older residents with technology. Nothing fancy, it said, just folks who can show people how to use email, access health portals, and recognize a scam. I almost ignored it. But yesterday, after the thing with Gloria, I walked over and put my name down. And now, here I was, walking into a linoleum-tiled room with coffee in styrofoam cups and folding chairs too close together. Everything smelled like floor wax and peppermint candy. I felt instantly at home. Jeanette, right? Said a woman in a denim vest and white sneakers. We're so glad you came. I paired you with someone already. She just lost her phone password and is near tears. Perfect. I sat with a woman named Barbara, who wore a shawl and kept apologizing for being dumb with these things. It took us all of 7 minutes to reset her password, and 15 more to show her how to send a photo to her niece. When she succeeded, she covered her mouth and said, "Well, I'll be damned." I laughed, loudly. It felt good. 3 hours passed that way. Quiet victories, unspoken dignity. A man asked me how to block robocalls. Another wanted to know if YouTube could teach him how to fix his toaster. I said yes, but advised gloves. By the end of the session, I'd spoken to 11 people. Not once did anyone call me Grandma. Not once did anyone ask me to stay out of the way. When I left, they asked if I'd come again next Saturday. I said yes. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. Outside, the air had that crisp bite of fall. You could smell wood smoke in the wind, hear dry leaves scraping the sidewalk. On the way home, I passed a mother dragging a toddler in a wagon. She looked tired. The boy was mid-tantrum. I smiled gently as I passed, and she nodded at me. Not an apology, but solidarity. We've all been there. At home, I found a small envelope under my doormat. No stamp, just my name, written in careful cursive. Inside was a drawing. Another one, this time from Liam. Me again, but now sitting in a chair, wearing a crown. Underneath, "You are the boss. Mommy says so." I stood there a long time, holding that piece of paper like it weighed more than it did. It didn't mean Haley had changed. It didn't even mean she respected me now. But it meant this much. She finally understood that I wasn't leaving. I wasn't going anywhere. And I wasn't going back to the place they'd tried to assign me. The one just outside the room, just outside the circle, just outside the frame. That evening, Josh stopped by, unannounced. Again. He brought dinner this time. Chicken from the deli and potato salad in a plastic tub. Not fancy, but enough. "I heard you're a tech coach now," he said, grinning. "Temporary," I said, "until they find someone younger." "Young's overrated," he replied. "Reliable is better." We ate on the porch, wrapped in old blankets. "Dad's still a little twisted up," he said eventually. "But he's coming around, slowly. He's quieter. He's thinking. Maybe." We watched the moon rise, the kind of moon George used to point at and say, "Now that's a good one." After Josh left, I stayed outside. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something to be over. I was just present. No tension in my neck. No guilt in my chest. No voices in the back of my mind saying, "Don't cause trouble. Don't take up space." I looked at the drawing one more time before bed, and I thought, not a boss, but mine again. My voice. My space. My story. Sunday afternoon, I found Patrick waiting on the porch. He wasn't pacing, wasn't on his phone, just sitting on the steps like he used to as a boy, elbows on his knees, head bent slightly, like he didn't know how to start something without being told. I stood for a moment, letting him wait. Then I opened the screen door. "You're early," I said. He looked up. "I didn't know if you'd be home." "I live here." He nodded, stood slowly. "Can we talk?" I held the door open. "Inside, but just you." He followed me in, quiet, careful. I didn't offer tea. This wasn't that kind of visit. He looked around like he was trying to see what had changed, but everything was exactly the same. The same kettle, the same chair with the cushion that sags on the left. The same photo of George above the bookcase, his eyes crinkled in mid-laugh. Patrick sat, not quite settled, shoulders tight, jaw working. "I've been thinking," he started. I waited. I didn't realize how much I took for granted, how much we all did. I thought, I thought you liked being in the background. I met his eyes. That's because it made things easier for you. He didn't argue, just nodded. I didn't come to make excuses, he said, or to ask for anything. I just wanted to, I don't know, speak plainly, for once. All right. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again, hands clasped like he was holding something fragile between them. I know what we did, he said. Haley and me. We made you small, useful, convenient. I said nothing. And I think somewhere along the line, I stopped seeing you as a person with wants. You became infrastructure. The word landed with a dull weight. Ugly, but true. You were just always there, handling things, never asking, never saying no. And he paused. I guess I mistook your silence for agreement. That's the problem with people who only hear themselves, I said. They think silence means yes. Sometimes it just means tired. He looked down, nodded again. I was angry, at first, about the trust, the lawyer, the house. I thought it was a betrayal. It wasn't, I said. It was a correction. His eyes flicked up, and for the first time in years, he looked at me like a man who didn't know what came next. What do we do now? He asked. We begin again, I said. On different terms. Can we? That depends. On what? On whether you keep showing up. Not for appearances, not to manage me, just to be here. As my son. No script, no hierarchy, just presence. He took that in. I can do that, he said. Can Haley? He hesitated. Maybe not yet. Then she stays where she is. He looked like he wanted to argue, out of habit, not conviction, but stopped himself. And the house? He asked. I'm keeping it. For good? For as long as I'm alive? After that, the boys get what I choose to leave them, through the trust, not through assumption. He sat back, not relaxed, but resigned. I can live with that, he said. I wasn't asking, I replied. A beat passed. I miss Dad, he said quietly. So do I. He would have been ashamed of how I treated you. I shook my head. He wouldn't shame you. He'd just fix the fence and wait for you to remember who built it. Patrick's mouth tightened. I don't want this to be the end of us. It's not, I said. But it's the end of who we were pretending to be. He sat with that for a while. Eventually, he stood. Do you want me to come by next week? He asked. Only if you want to. I'm not assigning roles anymore. He nodded once, then paused. Thank you. For what you gave us, and for what you stopped giving. That made me smile. Small but real. He left without hugging me. I was grateful for that. Hugging would have felt like punctuation. But this wasn't an ending. This was a comma. After he left, I opened the windows. Let the room breathe. The scent of damp leaves drifted in, mixed with the fading sun. In the distance, I heard Liam's laughter. Bright, sharp, free. I didn't move toward it. I didn't go back into the house. I just stood where I was, barefoot on my own floor, with no one waiting for a yes I no longer owed. And that was enough. The tomatoes never ripened this year. Too much shade, or maybe too much rain. I watched them go from green to softer green, then collapse under their own quiet weight, still clinging to the vine like they didn't know they were done. I didn't mind. Some things grow just to teach us patience. I pulled the plants out yesterday, cleaned the soil, trimmed back the rosemary that had taken over half the planter box. I left the thyme alone. It knows how to keep its place. Afterward, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. The afternoon had that soft golden hue that only shows up when you've already made peace with the end of something. The kind of light that doesn't beg to be noticed. It just lands, gentle and true. I thought about how this all began. Not with the money, not even with Haley's sharp tongue or Patrick's silence. It began with the way I stopped speaking. Not out loud. I still said good morning, still asked about the weather, still passed the salt at dinner without comment. But I stopped speaking from the place that mattered. I stopped naming what hurt. That's how it always begins. With a woman shrinking just enough to fit into the corners, other people leave for her. With giving the benefit of the doubt too many times. With telling yourself, it's not that bad. And then one day, realizing not that bad has become never good. They didn't steal anything from me. I handed it over, one small piece at a time. That's the truth of it. And the other truth is this. I took it back. Not with noise, not with vengeance, but with clarity, with folded paperwork, with a firm voice on the phone, with one stitched seam at a time until I could feel the shape of my own name again. I don't expect them to understand. I don't need them to. Understanding isn't a condition for respect. And love, real love, doesn't need silence to survive. I see my grandsons often now, on my terms. We read, we bake, we talk about stars and frogs and whether ghosts wear shoes. They don't ask me why I live out back anymore. They just know I'm here and that I choose to be. Josh brings me soup when he visits. Not always homemade, but warm. He talks to me like a peer now, like someone who watched a house fall down and learned how to build one better. Patrick sends short texts, fewer than he used to, more honest. I respond when I want to. Sometimes I don't. That's not spite. It's balance. Haley keeps her distance, which is fine. I don't need reconciliation that's only shaped like apology. My home is quiet, not the quiet of loneliness, the quiet of presence. There's bread rising on the counter, a book half finished by the chair, a list of names I want to write letters to, not for drama, just for memory. I live now without permission, without shrinking, without asking how much space I'm allowed to take up. And if someone walks past my little place and thinks I've been pushed out, overlooked, forgotten, let them. They don't know what it means to stand in a house you reclaimed with no one watching and still feel tall. I know. And if you're reading this, if something in you has been quiet for too long, if someone's made you feel like your usefulness is your only worth, hear me now. You are not a footnote. You are the story. Pick up the pen and write the next line like it belongs to you. Because it does. If this story reached something inside you, let it live beyond these words. Share it. Save it. Leave a comment if it gave you something back. Stories like this don't end. They echo. And sometimes, all it takes is one quiet voice to remind someone else they still matter.